Rolf Dobelli, my good friend Rolf Dobelli, is closing this day of our DLD All Stars. We chose him carefully because he is, first of all, a very good speaker. Second, he's a deep mind with great insights, and he's a good friend. I met him, Rolf, remember this, we met at a ski race in Davos, first time. I always know whom I met first time. I think this first seeing, this first pattern is amazing, very important. Rolf is the founder of WORLD.MINDS. Similar to DLD, it's a community of distinguished thinkers, scientists, and artists out of Switzerland. Rolf is also a renowned author of books, novels, and articles. As I said, he's a deep thinker, almost a poet, and almost a scientist. He combines everything. His books, for example, The Art of Thinking Clearly and The Art of Good Life, are bestsellers not just in Europe, but in the whole world. In an article I just read in the NZZ, in the Neue Zürcher Zeitung, Rolf called himself a practicing but not always successful Stoic. How does Stoicism, this ancient Greek philosophy, fit to this pandemic? Let's hear it now. And after Rolf's talk, we have time to dive into some questions from the audience, and I'm looking forward to it. Rolf, good seeing you again.
Great seeing you, Steffi. That's wonderful.
Right, where are you?
I'm in Bern, Switzerland, which happens to be the capital of Switzerland, but nobody knows that. Everybody thinks Zurich is the capital, but I'm in Bern.
Good.
It's beautiful.
Bernese, Rolf, go ahead.
Well, thank you. First of all, Steffi, let me thank you and the entire team for doing such an amazing job. I was, as you said, I was privileged to be part of the very first DLD, probably even the embryonic precursor of DLD, and DLD has been part of my life ever since. So thank you. Let me tell you the story of an interesting guy who lived 2,000 years ago. In the year 41, Seneca was sentenced to death. Seneca was a super successful businessman, kind of the Warren Buffett of the Roman Empire. But he was sentenced to death, and it was a purely politically motivated act. Luckily, the death sentence was changed into a banishment sentence, so he was exiled from Rome. Seneca boarded a ship that unloaded him in Corsica, where he lived for 8 years. Now, you must be thinking, banishment to Corsica sounds great. Where can I sign up for that trip? But 2,000 years ago, Corsica was a barely inhabited island and was one of the rawest spots of the Roman Empire, a rocky island, rugged cliffs, it was cold, and of course it was an intellectual desert, a tough spot for a man like Seneca. Now, today, most of us live in a lockdown light, so it's helpful to ask, what mental tools did Seneca apply to remain sane under much harder circumstances than today at a COVID lockdown? And the answer is Stoicism. Stoicism is a set of mental tools that are extremely useful to practical life, especially when the things get tough. I myself, as you mentioned, have been a self-confessed Stoic, not a very successful one, but I've tried to be as good as I can for 10 years. But again, I'm no master at it, but it's been very helpful to me. And the goal of any Stoic is the attainment of Ataraxia, which is a fancy Latin word that roughly translates into peace of mind, tranquility, equanimity, or in a more modern term, the absence of toxic emotions. So the absence of toxic emotions are things like anger, anxiety, envy, self-pity. So if you get those things out of your life, the upside will take care of itself. So you take the bad stuff out of your life, the toxic emotions, and the upside will take care of itself. So for the Stoic, a true success is inner success. What happens around him or her is not really that important. He just accepts most of it. So I asked myself, how would Seneca have dealt with Corona? And this is what I believe Seneca would have said. First, stop complaining. Complaining is inefficient. The coronavirus, this tiny package of RNA and proteins, doesn't give a damn about our opinions and feelings. According to the Stoic view, the world divides into two spheres. So on one side, we have the things that we can influence. On the other side, we have the things that are beyond our control. And it's totally idiotic to worry about things that are outside of our control. And this is the vast majority of things, especially when it comes to COVID. So let's do what we can with the masks and the social distancing and ignore the uncontrollable rest and do our best to stay productive and professional during this time. Second, Seneca would have said, accept that you have no higher knowledge regarding COVID than the experts. So our brain is an opinion volcano. It constantly spits out opinions about everything, about the weather, about your neighbor's cats, about which corona measures are right or wrong. Please put this volcano to sleep. The Stoics would not have talked nonstop about COVID. They would have not consumed 15 hours of media per week about COVID, which is the average. Many people consume even more than that. That's about 2 working days. They have much more useful things to do. So Warren Buffett, the legendary investor, has 3 trays on his desk. One is labeled in, the other one is labeled out, and then there is a tray that is labeled too hard. And the too hard pile contains all the things that are outside his circle of competence. In other words, things where he has no special knowledge or things he cannot think through within a useful period of time. So unless you are an epidemiologist or an economist or a medical doctor or maybe Germany's chancellor, I suggest that you toss your opinions about corona into the too hard basket. You know, even those people who have knowledge, whose primary job it is to understand COVID and its consequences, are swimming in a sea of uncertainty. And it's definitely true for us mortals. Now, opinions are like noses. Everybody has one. But the probability that your personal opinion about what politicians should do or should not do will turn out to be correct is vanishingly small. So enjoy the luxury of abstaining from opinions. It's one of the biggest luxuries that life has to offer. It's one of the most overlooked luxuries, and it's completely free of charge. So abstain from opinions. Next, Seneca would have reminded us to be generous. We can afford to support millions of unemployed people today, if necessary, for years. Why would the Stoics be in favor of such strong economic support? Because success and failure in life are largely a matter of luck, of randomness. Whether your company goes bankrupt or flourishes during COVID is purely random. Nobody went into a field of business with a pandemic in mind. But it's generally true that success and failure in life are largely a matter of luck. We don't want to hear that, especially not in an optimistic, self-made community as DLD, but it's true. Let me highlight this with one quick example. Take intelligence. Intelligence is crucial for economic success. If you're not intelligent today, let's say you have an IQ of 90 or below, you've already lost. So where does intelligence come from? It's largely the result of a random mix of our parents' genes. Did you interview the candidates for the job of mother and for the job of father before you were born and then pick the best candidates and place them into the field? No, we didn't choose the family we were born into. We didn't choose our parents. Therefore, we didn't choose the genetic makeup. We didn't choose our intelligence nor the personality traits. Not even the zip code was available for us to choose before we were born. So it's just fair and rational to support the unlucky people in this game. If you're successful, be humble about your successes. Most of it is based on luck, and we all know it. What the Stoics would have said next is this: assign COVID the proper place in your life. Most of us have experienced and will experience far worse things than a party ban, homeschooling, or fogged up glasses over a mask. In my office, I have an old iPad, and there an endlessly repeating slideshow shows up of images of war and disaster from the past 100 years. Solzhenitsyn in the Gulag, the muddy trenches of the First World War, prisoners in Auschwitz behind barbed wire. It's a slideshow that runs the whole day. a quick glance at these pictures reassures me that this pandemic is really a walk in the park in comparison. So put it in perspective. Next, Seneca would have told us this. Fundamentally, we've been living in a pandemic for millions of years, and this pandemic is called death. Even if you or I were to die of COVID, we would have lived longer and better than all our ancestors of the last 1,000 generations. We forget that we always carry death within us. It's part of our life, and that's why next to the iPad in my office with these crazy bad pictures in it, these horrible pictures, there's a digital clock that has big red glowing numbers that count down the days, the hours, the minutes, and the second until my statistical death. It now stands at a little more than 8,000 days. That's not much. Maybe it'll be even less because of COVID. I don't know. Well, if that's the case, that's going to be the case. I made up my mind many years ago that I won't take part of the race who lives the longest. There's something ridiculous about it. So those who are mentally prepared for the worst case have less fear, have more peace of mind, and think more clearly. By the way, the only exception against which a Stoic is really powerless is when death reaches for your own children, for one's own children. But other than that, you can face many hardships. The last thing I believe Seneca would have told us, even in the strictest and longest lockdown imaginable, even if we are not allowed to go outside for several months, we are still free. Even a slave is free in the most important thing, namely in his thoughts. Because we are free in our thoughts, we can reinterpret situations at any time. So the quality of your life depends largely on the quality of your thoughts, not on the technology surrounds us, not on the cool gadgets that surround us, not even on our Bitcoin wallet, but on the quality of our thoughts. So these were just a few mental tools that could be useful in dealing with Corona. These tools have been around for more than 2,000 years, and they're as powerful as ever. During the 8 years of exile, Seneca managed to send 2 letters back to Rome. I don't know how he did it. Somehow there's a boat going back to Rome maybe every 2 years. And one he sent to his mother about the lockdown. Remember, it was a lockdown for 8 years in a very harsh territory. So let me read just one sentence from that letter. Quote, "I'm cheerful and lively, as if everything is for the best. Indeed, everything is for the best since my head is free from the pressures and the stress of the day-to-day business life." So give Stoicism a try. It's a great firewall against all the bullshit and nervousness out there. There's no downside in applying it, only upside. Thanks.
Rolf, thank you so much for this talk.
Thank you.
It's a thought-provoking talk. Are you an optimist? Was Seneca an optimist, or was he a?
Yeah.
What is optimism and stoicism?
So they were realists, but they were very happy realists because they always had. They were always comparing the current situation, no matter how it is, with even worse situations. So by always having that comparison, even a bad situation gives you a bump of happiness. So Stoics are not the guys that you think are always kind of in themselves and never smiling. To the contrary, they were very happy people, realistic people, very happy. But because they got rid of the toxic emotions, like the anger, the self-pity, and so on, the positive emotions prevailed.
Interesting. So getting rid of the toxic emotions makes me happy. What is happiness?
It's very hard to define. There are 2 ways of asking, and Tony Kahneman has spoken at DLD many years about that.
Yeah, he spoke
many years ago about that.
He spoke yesterday.
Yeah, I know.
Fascinating.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. So there's 2 ways of happiness. One, you can measure the happiness overall. So if you ask the people, how generally happy are you with your life? And you get a score from 0, totally unhappy, to 10, very happy. Or you can say, at the moment, how happy are you? And we don't know which happiness measure is the same. And sometimes they're completely the opposite. generally speaking, when people look back at their lives and are asked the question, how generally happy are you? You get a higher rating than when you ask the people at the moment, because at the moment people might be in the car, stressing around, on the phone, doing emails, doing some sort of, or dealing with kids who are screaming, whatever. Usually you get a lower momentary happiness than an overall happiness. It's very hard to define, but the Stoics didn't go for happiness. It was not the main purpose. The main purpose of Stoicism was that thing, Ataraxia, that equanimity, that tranquility, that inner peace.
I would love to do a DLD on Ataraxia. I think it's an important begriff, important model for life. But let's go to some questions of the audience. One is, lots of people are protesting about freedoms being taken away by the pandemic. Do you think they are open to the learnings of Stoicism?
I don't know who is open and who is closed about Stoicism. I think we could all be open. It's not that difficult, really. It's a very simple thing. And the nice thing about Stoicism, you can read the original literature by Seneca, by Epictetus, by Marcus Aurelius. These are three big names. And you can understand them. So they wrote in a very clear fashion. It's not like the philosophy of Heidegger, which is completely unintelligible. So you can go to the major texts and read Stoicism, and you understand it. Probably the best way of reading about it is Marcus Aurelius, the book called Meditations. He only wrote one book. It was not even intended to be a book, but he wrote notes to himself. And it's very clear how he deals with his hardships. So I think everybody could be open. Now, as far as protesting against our freedoms, there again, I'd rather stay free of my opinions of what politicians should do and should not do, because it's not my circle of competence. I trust most of the experts. They have thought long and hard about it, and I don't think they have bad intentions.
What makes me thinking is what you're referring to a 2,000-year-old text book, Seneca, and Marco Aurelius, and I totally agree with many thoughts of them, but I ask myself, what means development in for philosophical terms? Aren't we 2,000 years become further, and aren't we wiser, more, or is our mind still the same as it was in 2,000 years for our ancestors?
Unfortunately, biology doesn't change that much, and our brain is a biological organ. It hasn't really evolved over 2,000 years. It's way too short of a period. Technology has evolved dramatically. Society has evolved dramatically, but the way of thinking and our first impulses are still the same as 10,000 years ago when we settled down. So I think we can take 2,000-year-old texts and interpret them. Of course, we need to move them into today's society and to today's time. There's also a lot of research in psychology that supports what those guys were writing 2,000 years ago. Now, this was not science 2,000 years ago, because they didn't really do scientific experiments and testing with random samples. Today, you can do that in science, and it turns out a lot of it is really working.
So interesting, Rolf. It's really, we should go on and discuss it. Are you writing a book on Seneca right now?
No, trying to. As everybody here in the program, we all have our plans for further books. I've written some of it in the book, The Art of the Good Life. So about half of it is about Stoic tools, mental tools that we have. But specifically, I have no plans of writing about Stoicism. There are excellent books out there, so it doesn't really need me. One excellent book would be from Massimo Pigliucci, The Art of Being Stoic. The Art of Being Stoic. Massimo Pigliucci is an excellent primer on Stoicism. So there's tons of great books about Stoicism out there.
When we first met, the two of us, you were a startup entrepreneur. You founded this amazing book shortened. What was the app called? Remember?
Get Abstract.
Get Abstract. And now you're a thinker and a stoicist. What was the moment you get rid of being an entrepreneur and tapped into the authorness and in philosophy and teaching people about how to live, how to get a happy life, what was it? What was the pivotal point?
Well, there's not really a pivotal point. You know, at a certain age, I think everybody asks himself or herself, what makes up a good life? So how do I want to live a good life? What is that? And if today you would go to a philosophy department and ask the professor of philosophy in any university, in Berlin, in Munich, in Zurich, and ask them, Professor, how do I live a good life? They would throw you out. They would send you to a shrink. And so I was really thinking, what makes a good life? Is it money? Is it success? Is it having a large family? Being an entrepreneur? What is it? And there's a lot of definitions that philosophers have come up with over the last 3,000 years or 2,500 since we have written documents. And really the best definition came out of Stoicism for me, and that is the absence of toxic emotions. That makes a good life. And it was so surprisingly simple that I started to read more. And as I said, you can go to the original text and they're very, very legible.
I like the idea of the absence of toxic emotion very, very much. I will exercise immediately on my way back home to Tegernsee. Tonight in this car, I will try the exercise. Thank you so much, dear Rolf. I hope we will have many talks in the next years. And I wish I would see you in person and I would now hug you. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thanks a lot.
Ciao. So, dearest audience, I hope you had a nice day. You had a nice 4 hours DLD All Stars. I hope you are energized, you're not tired, you're not bored, and you are open for the next day. We will have a great next day tomorrow. And it starts again at 4 o'clock. We have this wonderful matchmaking. Who of you did the matchmaking thing? Unfortunately, I can't see you, but I encourage you to go on DLD All Stars chemistry matching platform. It's an experiment. It's getting out surprises, and be open for surprises. But be also open for the next conference day. We have amazing speakers. I just mentioned Maria Gabriel, European Commissioner for Innovation, Research and Culture, will speak to Hans-Ulrich Obrist. Scott Galloway, our wonderful professor out of New York, will give his takes on the next developments in this year. Tristan Harris, Center for Humane Technology, the co-author of the amazing Netflix show, The Social Dilemma, and Kai-Fu Lee, Innovation Ventures, Neri Oxman, MIT Media Lab, in conversation with Andrea Kraje, and of course our good friend from the MoMA, Paola Antonelli, wonderful Paola, in conversation with Lucia Petrusti, Peter Westerbacher, the inventor, the developer of Angry Birds, have a bold vision and he will share it, and Jim Breyer, wonderful investor, great investor, have a conversation with Paul Bernhard Kallen, the CEO of Hubert Burda Media. I promise a smart conversation, an intelligent conversation. And they talk about healthcare and AI, a betterment for humanity. Very interesting. We have this super artist, Tino Segal. He has no title. It's his concept to have no title, not to talk about his art, but show us his art. We have Benoit Dashville from Snowflake in conversation with Christian Teichmann. And of course, our good friend Stefan Filzmeier from Brain Lab in conversation with Vivian Redding, Don Tapscott, Albert Wenger, ending with Laura Bremswick, a young girl out of Berlin who is talking about, you will see, be excited. I promise a good show tomorrow. Thank you for being with us. Ciao.